Start.
Die Sprachübertragung beginnt jetzt. Alle Teilnehmer befinden sich im Zuhörermodus.
We're ready to our webinar today. We are talking about hardware today. I'm your referent, Martina Prötzel. Welcome to my home office here. Thomas is joining us as well. He will answer your questions and forward them to me if you have any, or answer them directly. So today I want to talk to you about live inputs. In general, which ones do we sell right now, and how do they work in our software? So at first, I'd like to give you an overview of the available video input cards right now. And I'm very excited to also include the 12G SDI card, which will be released either today or tomorrow. We are not sure yet. So it's a very brand new Redford card that you will be the first ones to have some information about. I will go through each of the cards. So I have a sheet for them, and we will cover what kinds of inputs do I have there, what kinds of video formats can I process through the card, what about audio, what about the adapters, and so on. After all the cards, I want to talk shortly about the driver situation, because with the new release, we will change something with the drivers, you will see. And afterwards, on the last slide, I have some information about how to configure the inputs, because this is done in our software, and of course also how to use this in the manager. So before we get started with the technical details, this is an overview. So these are the cards that we sell right now. We have the DVI input cards that come with 1 or 2 ports. We have the HDMI input card that comes with 2 ports always. We offer the 3G SDI input card with 1 or 2 or 4 ports. And last, our new member to the family, the 12G card. In fact, it has this very monstrous name. It's a 12G/quad 3G SDI plus an HDMI display port board. But of course, this is kind of a tongue twister, so I will just refer to it as the 12G card. So let's start with the DVI input card and all the details about it. But first, one additional information. All of the boards do not process any HDCP protected signals. Of course, we are a media server. We read the signal, we can manipulate it, we can add effects to it and all that, and we distribute the signal through our network, and so we do not have any HDCP management in there. So this applies to all of the cards. So let's get started with the DVI input card. As I've mentioned already, we have the single and the dual version available. It's simply how many inputs you have on there, but all the other information applies to both versions. The DVI card supports the digital version as well as the analog version of the DVI signal. And it supports the single link and the dual link DVI signals. This is not to be confused with the number of ports. This is the name of the signal itself, how it was defined. It comes from the bandwidth that you can push through a single link cable or a dual link cable. The single link bandwidth allows full HD at 60 FPS, and the dual link version gives us the possibility to go higher with the bandwidth and the resolution included in there. So we can support custom resolutions, for example, one where you have doubled the width of the HD signal. If you've ever wondered about it, it's simply the number of connectors that you use in the DVI cable itself, or connector. So the simplest version is the DVI analog one. You have these are the 4 connectors surrounding this one slide here. And you have those connectors that are used for the analog signal. If you go to the digital signal only, those pins are not used in here, but you have added some more connectors. If you double the bandwidth to go for dual link, you are using those 6 in there as well, those 6 connectors. And if you combine the digital and the analog signal, you get this DVI integrated cable. So in here you have all the pins connected. So this is just why they are named like this, but indeed for the card itself, you do not have to worry about it. In here, all the pins are connected and we process all the signals that you input there. A few people know, but you can actually also process audio through a DVI signal. However, this is not supported by our card. And lastly, I'd just like to give you some information about the resolution that you can process through the card based on the most common 16:9 or 4:3 image ratios. For the DVI analog signal, this is the largest 4:3 resolution, and this is the largest 16:9 resolution. Same applies to the DVI single link, DVI digital single link format. And if you then double up to dual link, you can either double the frame rate from the HD signal, or as we have done up here, you can double the width. It's simply the calculation of the bandwidth that you are using. This would be the largest 4:3 image ratio at 60 Hertz. Thomas, do we have any questions so far for the DVI signal? Otherwise I would go.
Not until now. Thank you.
Otherwise, I would go to the HDMI card. This one comes with 2 ports always. We ship it with a DisplayPort adapter, so you can connect also, for example, a player or a server to it if you want to. HDMI itself is always backwards compatible with DVI. So it doesn't matter whether you have a DVI or an HDMI or a DisplayPort signal, all of them can be processed by this board. And importantly, for the DVI conversion, there is no adapter included, but you can pretty much take any one. You can also use passive adapters for this conversion because it's just a simple pin-to-pin connection in there. So there's no signal quality loss when you do that. Again, there are no audio formats supported. And for the resolution, I've written down some of the most common standard 16:9 formats. So here we have the HD signal at 120 Hertz, or a 4:3 image, a larger one with 2K. We have here an UHD signal or a full 4K signal. Of course, other resolutions are also supported, and for all of them, the frame rates between 24 and 120, they depend a little bit on the format itself, but the commonest ones are all supported. The last information regarding this card is since the last version 6.4.0, we have added another chroma subsampling option. So we have always supported the UHV version, and we have now added the 4:4:4 color resolution to it. You can set this one up when you configure the card. I will show this to you later on, just so that you have heard of it already. Thomas, are there any questions regarding the HDMI card?
Yes, there is the question if it is possible to adapt a dual link DVI into the HDMI input card. Is
a dual link DVI?
Yes. Dual link DVI signal. I wanted to answer myself, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So maybe you know better.
Well, you can always use adapters for it. As I've said, the DisplayPort or the DVI version also works for it. And yeah.
Okay. And there are more questions. Is the HDMI input card possible to run it with RGB 444 color depth in full resolution, so 4K 60 Hertz?
Yes, we have actually tested this. So it's a full 4K 60 at 444 color resolution that we have tested this on the server. So this is possible actually with 2 streams. So this card supports 2 4K 60 signals. So on each of those connectors, you can input those resolutions. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. That was the last question already. Thank you. If it's possible to run both with this high resolution. Thank you.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So wonderful. Let's get over to the next card. This would be the 3G SDI card. This one actually comes in 3 different editions, either with 1 or 2 or 4 inputs. But again, all the information is the same. Regarding here the audio stuff, with the 3G SDI link, it is possible to embed 32 channels. So of course we can also de-embed them and use them in Pandoras Box. For the resolutions, for the single, the dual, and the quad card, we support pretty much all the standard SD, HD, or 2K signals. So I've just written down some common SDI formats, which would be NTSC over here, the PAL version, the small HD version, the full HD, and the 2K resolution. For the quad card, there is a little bit of a specialty because here we can synchronize quadrants. I will explain this in a second. This enables us to also input UHD or 4K signals. So this one, 2160p, we can pretty much do everything between 24 and 60 FPS. The synchronization, we have added the possibility to synchronize input feeds when they are gen-locked. This means that they need to have the same resolution and they need to have the same frame rate, of course. Otherwise, you cannot gen-lock them and synchronize them. This possibility has been added since revision 5.7, I think. Let me just double check. Yes, 5.7, and you need the updated driver version for it as well. And if you do that, if you synchronize the input feeds, you can do those mask and fill setups that are quite common in the television environment, because the SDI signal itself cannot include any transparency information. So you always have one full image and another black and white image. And if you combine them and say all the white stuff in here is visible and the black one is not, well, then you have created some transparency information and you can put this signal then on top of another one of some background, for example. So this is possible, but also we can create larger textures. So this is when you stitch signals together. So you have on the first port, for example, you would put in the first quadrant, the second, third, and the fourth. We stitch them all together and you have created a larger texture, for example, a 4K1. This would be all the information about the 3G SDI input card. Thomas, are there any questions regarding that card?
I think you covered it very good.
Awesome. So I'm very excited. Oh, sorry, I've forgotten one information about the synchronization for the dual card. You can of course synchronize both feeds because there are only 2. And for the quad card, you have two options. Either you synchronize the first and the second, plus the third and the fourth. So you have two pairs, or you synchronize all of them to create this one texture. So these are your options. But now finally, we'll get over to the 12G card. This is it. Looking at the inputs, we have in the middle here the 12G input, which also works as a 3G input. So this input detects automatically which kind of signal you have connected. If you've connected the 12G one, the other 3G inputs, this, and this one, you cannot connect any other source to it anymore, or it's not processed. If you connect a 3G signal, those ones work. So in total, you have again a quad 3G card, which we have seen already on the last slide. In this case, however, the connectors are micro BNC ones. This is the only difference. In addition to the SDI ports, we also have an HDMI input up here, which we have seen just before that. And again, it's the HDMI 2.1 input, 2.0 input from the type A. It can also be converted to DisplayPort and again to DVI, just as we have just as I have explained before. So those inputs actually explain this this unholy long name up here with 12G and quad 3G plus the HDMI port. The card itself is shipped with a couple of adapters. We have included 4 micro BNC adapters and a DisplayPort adapter. But again, as I've mentioned, the DVI conversion is also possible. Again, we have 2 simultaneous 4K 60 streams available with this card. The first stream can be input through the HDMI port up here. And here, all the information applies as for the HDMI card. So the same resolutions and the same information about the chroma subsampling. For the second 4K stream can be input through the SDI part. So either you have one 12G signal or you have 4 3G signals that can be then stitched together using our synchronization feature. So here the same resolutions and the described features apply just as we have seen with the quad 3G SDI card. Let me just double check whether I have forgotten something with this one. It's actually our very first 12G solution. And the version that we will support it with is version 6.4.1, and it will be released either today or tomorrow. So stay tuned for this update. The next slide would cover any drivers. So Thomas, does anybody have any questions about the 12G card?
Yes, there is a question about audio. So is this can this card process audio?
It does, with the SDI part down here. So for the HDMI, the same applies as we have seen with the HDMI card, so no audio there. But for the 3G part, it should be the same 32 channels.
Right. And there are more questions coming in. What does the Blackburst do? Do we have any information about that connector there?
This is a connector where you can, you use it to synchronize or genlock the signal, but we have not really tested it because we are using genlock signals by itself, and we can synchronize them using our feature. So the connector is there, but we have actually never tested it.
Okay, cool. I also want to make my own comment on that. So because I did this mistake by answering some questions while you were referring, So the
Mm-hmm.
synchronization, just to make it clear, has to be done before the input. So it has to come in synchronized, and the synchronization will not happen on that input card. Just to make that clear again, because I did a mistake on an answer on the question. Sorry for that. So I hope I put that correct now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to
And
emphasize it again, the signals themselves must be gen-locked, so we are not gen-locking them by ourselves. This is another technology. What has happened in the past revisions is even when you had gen-locked signals in there, our render engine, it didn't know that they had still to be a gen-locked afterwards. So we read in the images and we put some effects on them, for example, and then we just spit them out to the graphic card, and simply the render engine didn't know that still they had to be gen-locked in that way. So Thomas is right, they have to be gen-locked before, and then we can synchronize them in our render engine. So it's simply what's happening in Pandoras Box.
Yeah, more questions coming in actually. If if you want to spend some time on that and more. I think there's a question for the drivers. That is something you will go into now, I think. So skip that.
Let's maybe put it for later. If I've not answered it, you can just tell me afterwards again.
I keep it visible here, so I'll check later.
All right.
And then we have, so we've used a specified SDI connector, or can I use one of that four? I think I don't understand correctly.
I'm sorry, me neither.
Maybe you can specify a bit more. We will answer that, and maybe we head on. If you can put that question.
Maybe it is whether you have to use the first, this one for the second stream. This is just the naming. Maybe this was a little confusing. So if you have a 12G signal, it must go into this connector. If you only have, for example, one 3G signal that you want to process, you can put it into any of those connectors. My mouse keeps to disappear. So so either this or this or this, or actually the first one as well for the 3G signal. It's just the way how it is named later on in Pandoras Box. But by using the third one, it's also okay. You don't have to use the first one necessarily.
It's about the synchronization.
Maybe that was the
question. So if you want to synchronize, you have to use the first pair or the second pair if you want to synchronize both, or all four of them to synchronize all four. That's
yes. This is the same information as we have seen with the quad 3G card. So you can either synchronize two pairs, 1 and 2, plus 3 and 4, or you synchronize all four of them.
Yeah. And people keep putting questions. That's nice. Thank you. So next question is, do the SDI cards support interlaced signals?
Yes. I have not. Let me just maybe double check. But thanks for that question. I actually also wanted to add that all the information can be read in the manual. The 12G chapter is also already written, and I will upload it as soon, of course, as the revision 641 is released. So for the 12G card, I've already opened it. You can see here, for example, some interlaced signals. So HD interlaced 60 is possible. 50. Yeah. If you have any specific, or of course NTSC is also interlaced. If you have any specific resolution that is not listed in here, you can always write this one to our support team and ask whether this is included as well. Sometimes the resolutions were quite long, and I just picked the most important ones, let's say, or the largest ones.
Yeah. So let me have a look on the clock. I think we have time for more questions. So another question is, multiple SDI resolutions, are they possible on different connectors? So different resolutions on different connectors.
If of course, if you do not synchronize them, or if you do not have the need to synchronize them, you can of course use different resolutions there.
Thank you. So on all questions about driver updates, we will push to later point.
I would also say this.
In which order will the inputs appear? I think that's the question, how they are named. I think that was already answered by you earlier, wasn't it?
I will show later on a screenshot of the manager, and there you will see how they are named. And the name refers to the name how they are in here.
And order of the connectors on the back plate of the card, isn't it? So it's the name always is the same connector, isn't it? It's not like the output card, like the NVIDIA card, when you use extended screens that it changes around if you change the setting. This always sticks with the same connector.
Yes. So for the 12G one, I'm not 100% sure. I'm sorry. I do not know whether there's any information next to it, but for the 12G one, it's for sure the middle on the left side. So this is why I've done the picture like this, so that you can refer to it when looking at the back of your server or player.
That's it for now, so we can move on. Thank you.
So the next slide is covering the driver information. Per default, all the cards are pre-installed on the hardware, and the drivers can be found under the PAS-C system. It's a good idea from time to time to check for any updates in the download center on our website. I think Thomas can forward you the link through the chat if you do not know the download center yet. For example, if we include this feature like I've described with the synchronization or the stitching, of course, this needs also to be done in the driver itself. So these are those occasions when we update the driver and then tell you to use new drivers, or when we go from a 32-bit system to a 64-bit system and all that. With this version 6.4.1, again released today or tomorrow, we are starting to support the original DeltaCast drivers for the DeltaCast cards. We are starting with version 6.14, so we have added this version to our driver package that you can download from the download center. So for the 12G card, you need to use this driver version 6.14 from DeltaCast, or of course any later one that will be released. Unfortunately, this DeltaCast driver does discontinue the DVI boards. It also discontinues the very old, I think they're 7 years old or so, HD SDI cards. I've not talking about them because we do not sell them anymore, but if any customer has them still, they need to stick to the driver version 6.01. That is the one that the latest run from our side, also included in the driver package. The other cards, 3G SDI and HDMI, are supported in both versions. If you happen to have multiple cards in one single computer, they all run this one driver. So in other words, you cannot combine the DVI board and the 12G board because they relied on another driver version and cannot be combined. However, if you use different driver versions on separate machines, so if you are in a client or in a master setup where you have different clients, that's not a problem at all. So this is how you can combine them. When using the new DeltaCast driver, the Windows Device Manager is changing a little bit because the cards are named now differently and they can be found in the DeltaCast folder. With the 6.01 driver, they were called Kudux cards and they were found in the audio input folder up there. This was so far my information regarding the drivers. Thomas, when you check the questions about them, have I answered them, or are there still some open ones?
There are more incoming, actually. Just a second, I have to read through that and to translate some. So there is an input from a colleague that different manufacturers cannot use different input cards over one system. So that's something we can a bit. I'm not very sure about that. Comment there, sorry.
You mean other live input cards? Well, I've just covered those ones that are sold directly through us, and for other ones, yeah, you have to. I forgot the name. What they have to support. So in order for us to be able to see them.
Direct show.
Direct show, thank you. If they are direct show cards, you can also use them in Pandora's Box. So if you want to buy another version and build them into your computer player or server, you can do that. Of course, always keep in mind the warranty.
Yeah, and there's one more question. I have to figure out something about it before I put it on all. So yeah, keep on if
all right.
If there's some more things to cover. Not much so far. Give me a bit of time.
Okay.
I have to figure something out and move on.
There was one thing I wanted to say. Oh, of course, the driver package is also then uploaded to the download center as soon as the 6.4.1 version is released. So you cannot find it right now, but in a short time. There was one thing I wanted to talk about. Delay. For all of the cards, we have always a delay between 80 milliseconds and 110 milliseconds. It depends a little bit on the format, on the frame rate, etc. But this is pretty much what you can refer to, and it does not change when using the Delta Cast drivers or any so. So it's caused in the render engine because we have to read in the signal. We must be then be able to put some effects on them and all that, and then we write out the signal. So in the minimum, we need 2.5 frames for doing all that. But if you have larger formats, we need a little more time. But in total, it's always between 80 and 110 milliseconds. So my very last slide covers the software side of the live inputs. As I'm in my home office and I'm only having my laptop here, we didn't want to ship an entire server over to my home office just for this purpose, because the screenshots are doing the same for you. When you open this explains the master setup. So when you are starting your player or your server in standalone mode, you see in the Assets tab under Local a Live Inputs folder. And this one, for example, shows the sorry, I was just confused by this naming. This one shows the 12G inputs. So here you have the first one plus the audio, and the 1, 2, 3 other 3G SDI ports, and the last one was input number 5 with the HDMI. So those numbers refer to the numbers that I've put on the picture next to the 12G card that you have seen. When you drag them from the Assets tab over to the Project tab, they are initialized there. And when selecting them there, you can go down to the inspector. You see them in here, again with this naming. and you can click the Configure button. In the configuration window, you will see this information that applies to the card. So for the HDMI part, for example, you will see the choice whether you want to have the chroma, the UHV or the RGB chroma subsampling 422 or 444. For the DVI part, you can say whether the input type should be automatically detected or whether you want to stick to one fixed resolution. And all that stuff can be done in the configuration. When you have done that, you can take the input from the project and then drag them onto a layer in the timeline. So this is absolutely the same process as putting a picture or a video there. It doesn't matter. One information about the version 6.4.1, we have optimized the way how we use the system performance. Before, we have always used system performance even if it was not assigned. This has changed now. No, wait a second. I'm confusing it with something else right now. When you are not assigning it to a layer right now, we are not using any system performance anymore in version 6.4.1. Just a small optimization, especially because this is supporting two 4K 60 signals, just as the HDMI card, and we want to give you a little more headroom to use other content as well. The same applies when you have a master client setup. Only that in the Assets tab, you would go open your client folder and then the live inputs and drag them in there. If you want to configure a live input that is existing on the client, you have to go over to the client and open the software there, which is of course already opened, but you go down of your full screen and to see this windowed render a window, and then you can click the Configure Live Inputs button. If you do it in the reverse order, you will get a pop-up. So if you first start your client and want to configure the live inputs, it will tell you that it is not yet part of a master. So you first have to do the master stuff and then go over to your client and click configure if you actually need it. In most cases, the configuration covers the standard applications. So far, it is from my side. Thomas, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, there are many incoming questions so far. So I think we will stay in that session for a bit longer and answer those questions for everybody or personally. There's just one thing I want to mention, as I tried earlier already, the input from my colleague. So for Pandora's Box, it's possible to use different client machines in the same network, in the same project, and use different input cards on those. So if you want to use on certain areas for your project different inputs, you can mix things up. So what Marnina was referring to was to use these cards in one and the same device. So there are limits on using those cards on one and the same device, but if you have different devices connected to your Pandora's Box network, you can of course use different drivers on different devices. So, and make sure you can use all of your input cards. So that's something
Absolutely.
we have an advantage to our
And additional information that it was so clear to me that I didn't even mention it, but maybe we should add it in here just to be clear. The live input exists on the client itself. It is not distributed like other content to other machines. So if you want to see a live input on a specific monitor that is connected on this client, it only exists there. So you cannot use the SDI signal from client number 3 on another client, or this also means that you do not see it in the manager preview. this is something that a lot of people stumble about over. You will, I think you just see an image in the manager preview. Yeah, just something. This is very important information.
Other ways, maybe we can do a webinar about that. How to put the different inputs. So if you use one video input for different clients, so you have to add them into one asset which you can use, and there you can also add the local device to display a test pattern, for example, instead of showing a live preview.
Yes, I wanted to actually add a webinar about attaching and the file inspector, or rather this file location table that you see in the file inspector. You might actually wait a second. It's this part down here. So not only when you work with live inputs, but also when you work with pictures or videos, you see those remove, attach buttons down here. And some people wonder what they do and what does this directory tell me? What is the status telling me? Like when it's saying completed or incomplete or something else. How do I work with this table in there? I'm planning on a webinar on that information. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so I think the time is pushing us to an end, so we will stay a few minutes, and there's already very positive feedback about the idea about doing an asset webinar. Thank you. So we will stay a few minutes online and answer more questions. So if you have more questions, you can keep putting them in, and we try to answer them. But we will stop the audio transmission for now and the video transmission, and thank you for joining. Martina, last words.
And Thomas, of course. Yes, thank you. I was a little bit excited. It was my first webinar, but I hope I've gotten all the technical information, and it wasn't, yeah, it was still fun to watch and to follow us. I hope you're all at home and that you're all healthy. And we are looking forward to welcoming you to tomorrow's webinar also. So as Thomas said, we will quit the video stream right now, but we are still online and we will answer your questions if you have any. Oh, as I'm seeing the links, I forgot the last slide, haha. As always, if you've seen the other webinars already, the schedule, and the dates, what is covered on that date can be seen on our website. If you have any ideas for this format that we are right now trying out, you can go to our forum. The help file, as I've shown you, is online. You can see all the information in there as well. And all the webinars are recorded, and we will upload them in a short time to our YouTube channel, so you can follow them as well. For example, if you are in a different time zone, or if you want to re-see a video. All right, so that should be it. Have a nice day, and see you soon again. Bye.
Cheers.